I think we have lost our chairman. Is he still in the meeting? Can I just get a clarification?
Yes,
Okay.
we've lost him.
Okay, we can continue on with the program. When he comes in, we will include him back. And I think, as we all know, there are always issues when it comes to online. You can never you can never put a correct hold on it. It will always disappoint you. But according to the program, we wanted to give over now to the family representative of the Moko family. I understand Umfundo Sulunga Moko is here. I'm going to hand over to him, Umfundisi, that he can just address us. And then once he has completed his addressing of us, we will then continue to the next segment of our program. Mfundisi Lungamogo, over to you, Put.
Okay, thank you very much. Good evening to everyone, guests, friends, the Moko family, the organizers of this memorial lecture, and to our esteemed speaker, Professor Sokuka, and I greet you all in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen. It is both an honor and a privilege to extend our heartfelt words of acknowledgement and gratitude on this memorial lecture in memory of a truly remarkable pioneer, Richard Moko, one whose contribution continues to resonate deeply, not only in our hearts, but also in the Adventist community globally. On behalf of the Moko family, I wish to express our thankfulness to everyone who made the effort to be present here. Your presence is a testament of the lasting impact our forefather, Pastor Richard Moko, had on all of us. To our guest speaker, Professor Sokupa, who also taught me Greek 3 in exegesis 1 and 2 at Helderberg College. Thank you for your willingness to share your reflections and also to honor his legacy through your dedicated research. To the organizing committee, the Moko Foundation, and everyone involved, your dedication and care in bringing this evening to life is not unnoticed. Thank you for creating the space for such a meaningful remembrance. Now, as we reflect tonight on this contribution that Pastor Moko had on everyone, may we live here carrying a renewed sense of purpose, being inspired not only by his accomplishments, but through his undying love for church planting, evangelism, compassion, unwavering integrity, and dignity. Thank you very much. God bless you.
Thank you so much to Pastor Lungamogo. I'm not too sure, is the chair back online? If you are chair, can you just unmute and you can resume?
Okay, thank you so much, sir. My apologies. My network is problematic this side. I shall switch my video off. I shall remain switching it off. Maybe it's going to assist us. We shall go ahead and actually bring in Mr. Hlanga Mafani on the podium to introduce our guest speaker. Mr. Mafani is an Adventist. Is an Adventist who actually started off the research on Richard Moko. He actually accomplished to write a book, his first book on Pastor Moko, which was from germination to generation Genesis. following the life of Pastor Moko and the beginning of the work of Pastor Moko and his work at large. And we shall hand over to you, Mr. Mafani, to do the honors of introducing our guest speaker, Dr. Sokupa. Thank you, sir.
And let me thank the chairperson of the Abalindi Men's Organization, AMO, and those of the Moko Foundation. While mine is very short and clear, is to introduce our guest speaker for today and in this inaugural lecture on Richard Moko. He was born and bred in Butterworth in South Africa and has gone through Adventist institutions like Kentele, Bethel, and even beyond these borders of this country in Philippines. Dr. Mkolisi Michael Sokupa is an associate director at Ellen G. White Estate of the General Conference of the Seventh-day Adventist in Silver Spring, state of Maryland. And I know that others would know it as Washington. Well, they're very close to each other. Will be forgiven to think about that. He holds PhD in the New Testament and church history. So he is an authority when it comes to church history. And of course, before he went to the Ellen G. White in the United States of America, and before he was at a sister institution, should I say sister institution, but at an SID branch of that institution, that is the Ellen G. White Research Center at Helbert College in Cape Town, South Africa. And whilst he was there, as we have already learned and heard from Pastor Lunga Moko, he was also a lecturer at the same time, meaning doubling as a director as well as a lecturer. His writings include, as we know, if you go online, and he has written many stuff around the church history on Richard Moko for Stellenbosch University, for UNISA, and other institutions. And there are plenty and many of them, but if I may just point few, is the documented memories of Richard Moko's life and contribution. That is a Seventh-day Adventist heritage reflection. Also wrote on Sabbath observance, law and religious freedom. Also wrote on the very first Seventh-day Adventist church in the Southern Africa and arguably in Africa, Beaconsfield in Kimberley, the Beaconsfield Seventh-day Adventist Church, from first church in Africa to museum status. That was his focus. And also he's responsible at where he is now at the Ellen G. White Estate in the headquarters of the Seventh-day Adventist in Maryland. He's also responsible for translations. And of course, the SID would attest to this, that we have also benefited from that. And for instance, the book from Genesis to Germination was also translated, and Pastor Hachalinga will also bear testimony to that, as I have seen that he's also amongst the audience, which we feel very much pleased to have him here. Dr. Mkolisi Michael Sokupa worked for the church in many capacities, in various capacities, as a pastor, as a departmental director, and in the Cape Field Southern Conference in South Africa. He's, of course, married to Mem Undombizanele, widely known, affectionately known as Zana Sokupa, and they are blessed with 3 children, a daughter and 2 sons. The daughter is Nusbabalo, and the sons is Sinedinga and Saneliso. And of course, to me, he's a former schoolmate at Kentele, and I know that, and to many, he is as such, and a friend. And now, ladies and gentlemen, without much ado, let me take this right to Dr. Sokupa and say, Dr. Sokupa, this is yours, and welcome to all our audiences. I know that they've been acknowledged, and we've got audiences from different platforms like your YouTube and other platforms. And we've got others from across the continent, like Kenya, Tanzania, Zim. And I've seen my former teacher as well, Geraldine Yaze from UK. And I know that there are others in San Francisco and Philadelphia. And all of us, of course, South Africa, and all of us and those that I've mentioned, you're welcome. And Dr. Sokupa, and I now invite you to deliver the lecture. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that kind introduction. And I'd like to appreciate the work of AMO, the various areas of focus that were outlined in the introductions. We are in appreciation of this army of men and women who are present here, who have an interest in Adventist heritage, Adventist history, particularly today as we focus on the life of our pastor, our elder, Richard Moko. I would like to extend greetings from our office here, the Ellen G. White Estate. There is a very keen interest on the history of the church in South Africa from here. It is growing, and particularly in the past year, we have had a very strong research interest in the very beginnings of our work in South Africa. I am grateful that my colleague, Dr. Hatchalinga, is on the platform, who has in fact also authored a book. And this book is very important as part of this contribution to the life of Pastor Richard Moko. The title of his book is Echoes from Table Mountain, Experiences of the Seventh-day Adventists, Pioneers in the Cape, Adventism Gateway into Southern Africa. His book is also available. And of course, the seminal book has been introduced already by Elder Hlangamafani, From Genesis to Germination. I have quoted this book very often. As I mentioned, it is a very important foundation. These two books actually have a very complementary approach. Hlanga Mafani focused on largely interviews. As a journalist by background and training, he interviewed a massive number of people on the development of the work, and also interviewed very intensely the family members, the Moko family. And these interviews he documented very carefully and made comparisons of data. I highly respect the work that he has done. And also Dr. Hatchalinga has tried to look at what is available in terms of sources, and he has tried to pull a very diverse, a very complex history of the church in South Africa into a succinct work in order to have at least something that would give a broader look at the history of our church across the color line. So this is a very good start and a good foundation also as we look at the work of and contribution of Pastor Richard Moko. I would like to begin by looking at the South African Adventist historiography. This is a very important area as we look at history writing coming out of a oral history tradition, oral history culture. We have started moving out into a writing type of community as Adventists, looking at Adventist history. Publications such as what I have already outlined, just highlighted two. I could highlight more, such as Pastor Nhlapo's book, Tears from the Black Pulpit, that also seeks to draw from our pioneers, including Pastor Moko and others, what they have contributed, the times in which they live. I think his work focuses a lot more on that context and the context in which our pioneers survived. So looking at all these writings, they form up what we call the historiography, which is the way in which history has been recorded, written, transmitted, and communicated in the past. So looking at the historiography of the pioneers, particularly looking at the historiography of the Seventh-day Adventist Church, early Seventh-day Adventist Church in South Africa, and also particularly on our pioneers, Richard Moko and others, we see a need for filling gaps that have been identified. And so this has been done in various ways by various approaches. And so as we look at the challenges in this complex history, how do we move forward? I like the idea of mission that was emphasized in the earlier introduction, that our focus is not just to account for historical facts and also to recount the context. And this is not the end of our task. While it is important for us to get the history facts correct, while it is important for us to have the important events, both political, socio-political, and also within our church, in context of how our pioneers lived, it is really important. It is equally important to have a focus. And what is our focus as we reflect on this history? I want to submit that our focus should be to look at the mission of the church in South Africa. Just a quick reflection on that mission. Looking back over 100 years of mission from the time the work started, we have a huge a huge gap as we look at the way our pioneers tried to accelerate the work, and now looking at the population versus the growth of the church. This is not a number game, as some would look at it, that, well, we are not really on for number games. But the numbers do reflect receptivity. They do reflect a lot of challenges and needs. And this calls for reflection, not only by historians, but also church growth specialists. Also, people that are looking at political situations, theological issues, and so on. What are some of these issues that are affecting the growth of the church? And how did our pioneers, like Pastor Richard Moko, seek to attend to these issues? How did they survive under those challenging circumstances? And where are we now in terms of that? So definitely just looking by reflection during our ministerial meetings in February in Durban, just a cursory look at how our church has grown. We are shy of 200,000 members to a population of over 56 to 57 million. This, of course, is something that many have reflected on. What can we learn from our pioneers in terms of their methods, their resilience, and their approach to mission? And how can that reflection, this reflection on Richard Moko, help us in order to move the work forward? And very recently, there was a focus on South Africa by SID, which was a very noble task. And they are continuing to focus in other countries, other areas. Zambia was next, and now it's Indian Ocean Union Mission. So these efforts, as you follow up and look back, what is it that has really happened in terms of bringing church planting that was mentioned here, church growth, and also the growth of the church in terms of quality? Because we're not just looking at the church of the growth of the church in numbers, but in terms of quality. Just an aside here, I would like to highlight the very first contribution, major contribution, that Pastor Richard Moko made to the Seventh-day Adventist Church was the translation of Ellen G. White's Steps to Christ into isiXhosa. And looking back at translations that have been done up to now, we only have a handful. We have not even reached 10 books. Going back to late 1800s, 1895, from that time where he started his ministry among his own people, and felt that this book was needed as a guide. And yet we have fallen so much backward in terms of this task. And of course, there are many other areas where translation is needed to reach people that cannot otherwise read Ellen White's writings. And this is not only just Xhosa language, we're looking at Zulu, we're looking at Sesotho, our African languages that are used in worship, in our churches, and yet people don't have access to these resources, these materials, particularly this prophetic guidance for this time. And so looking at these needs helps us to reflect more deeply. And I'm now talking from the heart here, that AMO could be also one of the platforms that could help to accelerate the work where now we are lacking in so many of these important areas. So appreciation to this initiative, and also an appreciation for the work that has been done so far, but the gap is huge. The need is great. And so our effort should not be just to recount the history, but to learn from it and to try and find ways in which we can implement some of the methodologies that main and principles actually out of the methodologies that were used by our pioneers. And for me, one of the highlights of the work of Richard Moko is church planting, where he moved on that gospel wagon from place to place, planting churches and going into unentered areas, making sure that Adventism has presence where there was no presence. I recently visited an island of Samoa. This is out in the Pacific Ocean. So as we traveled into the island from the airport, something significant, to my mind, was observed. One, Adventist presence there was phenomenal. Every community had a signboard, and that signboard said Seventh-day Adventist Church, and it pointed the direction to a local church. So I lost count of how many church signs I saw along the way, leading to the mission where we were going to have the meetings. This to me was not just an indication of presence, but also visibility of this signage helped to even a visitor to see, without even going into statistics, how the work had grown in this island. And so this is just an illustration of how church growth, motivated by the resilience of our pioneers, could be replicated today with so much resources that we have, financial resources, human resources. And this is exactly what AMO is all about. Looking at all of these things, we see a great need for moving the work forward. And so as we look at the historiography of the life of Moko and also of the church, we have to go back to those early beginnings. Right now, we are exploring Kimberley. With our research team, we descended on Kimberley to look at what we can find on William Hunt, the very first Adventist who set foot on South African soil. Very little is known about him, and yet he had such a significant influence that led to the establishment of the church in South Africa. Forgotten, very little known about him. And so Richard Moko, it is believed, as we look at the records, that he at some point was at Kimberley. If you go to the museum that is in Kimberley right now, there is no picture of William Moko among the pictures that are there of pioneers of the Adventist Church. He is forgotten in terms of that little museum at the back of the church that outlines the pioneers of the church. And yet this is where the foundation of his life as an Adventist was set. And this is where he was baptized. This is where his work actually was inaugurated. And so we are looking very intensely at some of these imbalances and trying to bring to light, starting with the very first pioneer, William Hunt, and to move on to the charter members and also people that are significant in the history of the Adventist Church who set foot at Kimberley during these early years. One of the charter members is said to have had a contribution in the conversion of Richard Moko, Pastor Richard Moko. And so as we look at these gaps, it is so important for us to find ways in which we can close those gaps. And so in the coming month or so, we will be descending on Kimberley, to mark the gravesite of William Hunt, which was discovered very recently. Nobody knew where he was buried. And so through our research, we found the very place where William Hunt was buried. I remember traveling with Hlangamafani through East London. We went to Debenek, and he showed me the place possibly where Richard Moko's grave could be. The graves were moved from a certain location to another location where mass graves are right now. And so a thought came to my mind, which I think I must just say it so that family members, the Moko Foundation, and also the AMO group could also think of this very seriously, that we do need a type of marker at that spot where the mass graves are, where at least a sign could be placed there for historical purposes, not for any other purpose of veneration, but for purposes of historical education, where this marker could outline that the bones of Richard Moko were moved to this area. We may not have the identification of any specific place. And the last time when I was involved with Heritage in South Africa, I did approach the municipality of East London to find out if they would be open to such a marker being placed there. And they were very open, very happy to consider it. Somebody could take that on, either the Moko Foundation or the AMO group itself, to make sure that we have a marker that will serve for this educational purpose, where we can take people around, like recently what the youth department did in East London, to take people around to these heritage sites and to present the work of our pioneers, where they were possibly laid to rest, and so on. So the state of our historiography, coming back to my point, is indeed improving from where we were before. We know more now about Pastor Richard Moko than we knew some many decades ago, when the Adventist history already was presented, but in a very kind of one-sided way. And so as we have these developments, it is important for us not just to look at historical facts, but also to listen to the stories of our pioneers. I was going through recently the heritage, or at least some of the publications of our church in the past. I was kind of despondent as I was looking at the way recording of our pioneers' contributions was happening. From about the 1900s, early 1900s, to the time of the death of Richard Moko in 1932, the voice of Richard Moko appears in a very, very kind of limited way. when I say the voice of Richard Moko, I mean there were opportunities for our pioneers to give reports, to share and write about their work. And I found that during these early years from the 1900s going forward, there's kind of very little that one can glean. It's only at about 1914 where we find reports from Pastor Richard Moko directly from his pen coming through, where he is citing some of his experiences and work and so on. And this was, to me, a very significant find as I looked at, his own voice, how he expresses, the work that he is doing. And I've highlighted those in one of the articles that I wrote on the documented memories of Richard Moko's life that was already highlighted during the introduction. And so when one looks at the lives of our pioneers, you wish you had more to listen to. And so the little that we have needs to be preserved, and those stories need to be told to our upcoming generation, our younger people. They need to know and hear these stories and the voices of our pioneers as they write, as we don't have audio or video of our pioneers. But I think a lot can be done to formulate and look at the sketches of what we have to bring to light the contributions and voices of our pioneers, such as Pastor Richard Moko. And so as we look back at our history today, the history of Richard Moko in Adventism today would be my second point. I looked at historiography, and I also just highlighted some reflections on my mind about the area of historiography. But now I want to just move very quickly into the area of Richard Moko in Adventist history today. So we have this accumulation of historical facts, information, where he worked. But as I mentioned, looking at historiography and collection of stories, we still have not really had much on the voice of Richard Moko. I don't think we can lose hope. There could still be some documents that can be found on his letters. I don't know. Maybe somewhere a diary. We don't know. We have his Bible. We have some information in a file at Helderberg where Dr. Hatchalinga is, but there is still room for more. And while at that, let me also mention that there is a need to highlight Mrs. Emily Moko and her contribution as well. We have gone a very long way in highlighting the contribution of Pastor Richard Moko, but very often our shepherdesses are left out, and there could be some more that we can glean about her as well, the wife of Pastor Richard Moko. This may also encourage our shepherdesses and also our church members, our ladies, our women's ministries, to see how our pioneers and their wives worked together as a team, and also the support, tremendous support that was received by our pioneers from their wives as they were going out for days on end on a wagon, sleeping along the side of the road in order to bring a message to places where people were not accessible and reachable. And so we need to appreciate our shepherdesses. And so I want to challenge scholars, writers, pastors to also think about this important area of highlighting the contribution of our shepherdesses, especially Mrs. Emily Moko. So as we look at Richard Moko in Adventism today, where are we? I think a lot has been kind of registered in our publications. I have kind of taken a stand where it is important for us not to work in isolation as a church, but to also think about how we send our message in some subtle way to scholars, to thinkers, church leaders who may pick it up and get to know a little bit and have a window on understanding Adventism that they would not have in any other way. There are people who are interested in reading history of churches, and as we know today, there are even vloggers who are just coming with interest in Adventism. They are not Adventists, but they just want to, know more about Adventists. And so very often in these cases, we find a lot of distortions that are happening. And so bringing our work into this academic space may also help to make sure that we build on a solid foundation on our history and also highlight the contributions of our early pioneers. There have been opportunities that I received where I was presenting in conferences on Richard Moko, particularly the article on documented memories was actually based on the presentation that I had done in one of the conferences. And in these conferences, various churches were presenting their pioneers and also lamenting on how these pioneers had been forgotten. So it is not a unique kind of Adventist plague. It has plagued many churches where, we're coming from an oral tradition culture where very little is recorded and very little is even told in terms of stories. And so coming out of that, many churches were beginning to write and look at ways in which these stories can be documented. And so this interaction has helped me a lot. As I see, there was a follow-up in 2016, a scholar from Durban, Pietermaritzburg, no, it's KwaZulu-Natal University. His name is Philip Dennis, a very strong supporter and also a very reputable historian. And he quotes, first highlights the importance of that conference, and then he quotes some important areas on what I had presented on Moko. And I cite his article in 2016 on Studia Historia Ecclesiastica of 2016, page 4 to page 22. And he says, Moko's story is exemplary. It shows how an agency of articulation of memory made of pastors, academics, and publicists managed to challenge within a short time the dominant version of Seventh-day Adventist Church's history. And he continues, giving a new visibility to the story of the first indigenous minister of that church, a man almost completely forgotten. And so he was reflecting on a paper I had delivered and highlighting the importance of that episode, and looking at others as well. And talking about memory in this very same article, he says memory is the ability to encode stories and narratives, and also to retrieve information. Different parts of the brain, all interconnected, are involved in the act of remembering. To each form of memory, whether it's habitual memory, short-term memory, long-term memory, or traumatic, corresponds a type of neurological connection. Memory is a dynamic process. When we remember, we select, organize, and omit, and sometimes invent aspects of our past experiences according to what we need, feel, and believe in the present moment. The memories of the past are fluid. And he says, we remember the same events differently at different moments of our lives. In each new situation, we change the manner in which we recall memories and structure them in our minds. So highlighting again the importance of memory. And I think I have already highlighted how in Hlangamafani's book, memory plays a very important role. However, we have already noted that because memory is such a fluid thing, we are sometimes caught up in a state where we have lost people who may have had that memory and it was never transferred from one individual to another, or from one individual to a group of people. And so that way we lose a lot of memory. And this has happened for churches where the church has forgotten how it all started. We have new people, we have new members, nobody knows how this church was started. And so I think the role of history, recalling and also documenting some of these things has to have a ripple effect where as a result of conferences like this, we are able to move this work forward and also document histories of our local churches, preserve those histories and make them available to the next generation. There are many people who have made contributions that we need to remember. So looking at Richard Moko in Adventism today, his name, because of the publications that have come up in the past few years, or at least a decade, we see other churches now beginning to understand Adventism better. And so this acquaintance with our Adventist history from literature available has helped to give orientation to many people who may have had a very negative view of Adventists, but because of our publications, people now have begun to understand our history. So on the international Adventist historical platforms, I want to highlight Dr. Hachalinga's role as the editor of the Encyclopedia of Adventism. We have a number of our pioneers, including Richard Moko, whose work and contribution has been acknowledged in this platform and in this publication, which is online. And so there are many other articles that they are seeking to write that can continue the tradition of preserving the important work of our pioneers. So this is now at an international level within Adventism, where we have a collection of stories, a collection of histories that relate to not only pioneers, but also pioneer places and also the development of the work. And this is highly commendable. The last time I checked with Dr. Hatchaling, I think they had done about 100 plus articles. I don't know where the statistics stand now, but there are constant appeals to have articles that may be placed on this platform so that our Adventist people in other parts of the world may also have a window to understand and know where the work started, how the work started, and where Adventism is in terms of artifacts, in terms of pioneer places. There is a lot more that can be done. In actual fact, let me highlight this. The way Adventist Heritage Ministries, which is connected to the wider state in fostering our history, the way it started, it was not started by the church or the GC. It was started by lay members. Lay members heard that there was a house, a significant house in our history that was being sold, and nobody cared. And so they brought this to light, and they organized a way in which that house can be purchased back to the church. And this is how Adventist Heritage Ministry started back in 1983. And from there, the purchase of one house led to other properties being appropriated back to the church. And now we have a number of places where, when we visit the United States, we are able to go, to these places and enjoy the stories of our pioneers. And many visitors come to South Africa and they go sightseeing and looking at the wonders of South Africa. But very little is, possible for them to have something where they can follow some, guide on Adventist development in that area, which would be an interest not only for Adventists, but also for non-Adventists. And so the role of this heritage development is vital and very, very important. And so the connection of Moko's story to academic, publications, to other writings that we do that connect and feed into general knowledge about Adventism may be taken very lightly. But many people, when they hear the message Adventism, they want to know about the church before they even commit. So they go into Google to find out what is there about Adventists that I can read. And so, once they have these publications coming up and they read about the history of the church and understand, oh, this church is not a new church. This church is global. This church is big. And then people begin now to understand the context by looking at the lives of our pioneers, such as Pastor Moko. I want to just highlight something important here as we look at this context, this global context, political context, and all these other contexts, and looking at the life of Pastor Moko. I mentioned that the work in South Africa is kind of starting around 1871 with the arrival of William Hunt, the first Adventist in Southern Africa to touch, the African soil. So he arrives in Kimberley, and then looking at the World Adventist events, I just want to highlight a few of those because this is an important context as we look at the developments of our church. In 1872, the first denominational school opened, and Goodlaw Harper Bell was the leader or principal of that school. And then in 1872, again, we have a foreign periodical issued as Adventist Times. And then in 1874, we have Battle Creek College established. And then the first Signs of the Times issue. J.N. Andrews, the first foreign missionary sent out in 1874. We have kind of been a latecomers in terms of mission. If you look at 1874 and even earlier with William Hunt, 1871, that time Christianity in South Africa, Christianity in Southern Africa, Christianity in Africa was already at its height. And here we are just beginning in 1874 to send the first missionary to Europe. So as we look at our late coming, it has posed a lot of problems in the establishment of missions, conflicts because we're bringing something new, the Sabbath especially, sanctuary, these doctrines were not known. And so as one looks at the tensions that were built, I remember reading the history of how the church started in Kenya. I went to Kendu Bay, where the work started. And it's right on the coast, you know, of the very name says it, on the coast of Kenya. And so, you know, the person that was taking me around shared with me why we have our mission right at the end of, you know, the world there. And he said, our missionaries came, and as they were moving from place to place, seeking to establish a mission, they were told, already taken, already taken, already taken. No, you cannot stay here. We already have a church allocated to this place. So finally, they got to the end in Kendu Bay where they said, okay, you can establish a mission here. And that stone church still stands in Kendu Bay in Kenya even today. But the stories, amazing stories of how the missionaries tried from place to place to find a place to establish a mission. And this brings a kind of a parallel point again on Richard Moko. I'm not able to share all the details in this short time, but I'm just highlighting some important areas where Richard Moko was involved in the establishment of missions. And as I was reading recently, the establishment of you know, the Bethel mission, and also the Fraser's Camp mission, he was directly involved in the establishment of those missions and many other places where the work was opening and where he started and pioneered the work. We are standing on shoulders of people that had resilience based on the motivation by God's Spirit and nothing else than just human motivation. I want to believe they were moved by God's Spirit to start the work and to continue the work until their strength was gone. And looking at the life of Pastor Moko, even after his retirement, he continued. I was reading the list of workers when the work started of the Xhosa mission. I am diluting the term. As you may understand, it had another word, but I'm saying the Xhosa mission because of the word that was used then and accepted, but we don't use that word anymore. Go into the history and you will find it. So as this mission was starting, they were listing all the pioneers, and Pastor Moko is not allocated a place where he was working because he was already retired. but next to his name, they wrote General. And to me, that was encouraging to see that they had not forgotten him. He was not just placed as retired, but they knew that he continued even after retirement to work. And so they would call him from place to place to help and to foster the work. So even after retirement, the stalwart of our work, pioneer, continued to work hard and to try to bring our work forward. In 1879, continuing with my list, the first local young people's society was established, and our young people know this history. And so as I outline this history of Adventism, this is something that master guides do. They have to write a history of the church, and also write an exam on it, and also they have to write about local heritage. And so these publications that we have helped a lot as people do research to find out about our pioneers, to find out about our church and its development. And this is a very important area for the development of our church, where our young people have to have resources and up-to-date resources that help them understand the history of our church. And then around 1881, first canvassing work began. And of course, this is an important area as we look at canvassing work. The development of our work in many areas was started by canvassers, literature evangelists. And so it's important to understand that history. 1885, Ellen White goes to Europe. Ellen White also went into mission. And so she understood the dynamics of mission. And hence, in 1887, when the first missionaries that were sent to South Africa landed, she wrote some letters. And we have a publication called Testimonies to Southern Africa that highlights Ellen White's testimonies and Ellen White's counsel to missionaries on how they should go about the work in Africa, highlighting some principles. And then Avondale School was established in 1901. Sanitarium and review buildings burn in Battle Creek, 1902. Now, just highlighting some important area of 1901 and 1902 up to 1903. This is a period of restructuring, a period of expansion and growth. And this is where you begin to have the publications of the South African missionary from about 1901, which we have right now. There were other publications before, but this was a union kind of paper. But it is interesting to note how South Africa was involved in the restructuring of the global church during that time. Robinson was in charge of the work here in South Africa. And during that time, he looked at the structure of the church and looked at these organizations that he needed to kind of develop, and looked at the workforce and saw that with the workforce he had, and also all these organizations and boards that he needed to create to kind of parallel what we already had. Departments at that time were having boards, and they were not part of the conference. The conference was the administrative body. The boards were kind of running independently, but reporting to the conference in some ways. And so this structure was not going to work. And so he experimented with a plan to incorporate the departments into the conference. And the rest is history. We now have a structure that has been accepted globally, where departments are part of the conference. And this was done here in South Africa. So looking at the history of our church globally, and also highlighting some of the contributions that came from Africa, is not done by all historians. Some historians have kind of played down this for many years, but research has been done, and this was brought to light by some historians like Barry Oliver, who did research on Adventist organization, and this he picked up and highlighted the importance of and highlighted the importance of the work that was done here in South Africa. So looking at Richard Moko in context, we see his contribution and contributions of others in line with these developments of our church, and how the work was developing forward up to the 1930s. I just covered 1871 to 1934, where in 1934 we have the SDA Theological Seminary open. So that's the first time we have an official school where our pastors are taught. Looking at Helderberg College, pastors were trained at Helderberg College for many years, even before this. But in kind of a seminary for the world church was developed in 1934. And of course, I won't go into the challenges that affected Pastor Richard Moko in terms of admission to these institutions of learning like Helderberg, Spionkop, and Claremont College, where it was difficult or impossible for our African leaders to come in and study. So it took years before parallel institutions were able to accommodate our leaders for education. Mission was important, and many of them wanted to study. As you look at the background of Pastor Richard Moko, he was a well-educated.
Sorry, you are muted, Pastor. We can't hear you. You're muted.
Oh, I don't know how long I've been muted.
No, it was a short, a quick one. It's okay.
Okay, somebody muted me. Anyway, as we look at this long history of the Adventist Church, connecting it with the stories of our pioneers, we also need to look at the history and the development of South Africa, of Southern Africa, and connect this history. And this is kind of the weak point of our earlier histories, where they were just focusing on stories within Adventism without any special look at the history of the developments of South Africa. If you look at Kimberley, for example, where Pastor Richard Moko resided for a time, where he worked for a time, where he was, it became a cradle of his development. That was a very volatile, dynamic environment at the time, with the diamond mines and challenges. But I found that, churches already sent people there. The Methodist Church, I think, was one of the first to send pastors to the mines in order to take care of the needs of Methodists. And so our church had just started. We only had a church building around 1890, and that's where Pastor Richard Moko was baptized later. And so we have other pioneers that were, receiving the message from Kimberly, such as Pastor David Kalaka. Just to highlight the trajectory of our pioneer, Pastor Richard Moko. He started off with a missionary license, and then as a licensed minister, and then later on was ordained around 1915. I don't want to go into the politics of his late ordination after having contributed so much to the church. But you do see these disparities as you look at how other pioneers started and how they were ordained in a very short time, who even started after him. And so we appreciate the faithfulness and also the resilience of our pioneer, Pastor Richard Moko, among even those issues where one would have felt, this is unfair. In fact, we know for a fact that he had many offers outside the church, but he turned down all those offers to be a translator for one of the governors and also to be given a church to pastor outside of Adventism. He was given all those offers, but he decided that he wanted to be faithful to the truth that he had received. And so because of his faithfulness, we have the Seventh-day Adventist Church thriving in the Xhosa speaking areas and beyond, in Kimberley, where he worked. And so as we look at highlighting his contribution and his work, I think connecting it to these developments within South Africa, within Adventism, is very important. I'd like to now move to an area for future research and development. I've highlighted some gaps where we need to also look at Mrs. Moko. What was her contribution? Is there any information, particularly on her, that we can also highlight so that as we develop our pioneer information and data, we may also highlight our shepherdesses, especially our mothers in Israel. Future research may also look at other pioneers who built on the work of Richard Moko, and also people that were contemporaries with him, how they worked together, how they interfaced, and also our earlier leaders who knew Richard Moko, and whether we could retrieve some information from their legacies, such as documents they may have, pictures they may have, and so on, so that we can see the connection from Richard Moko to other Adventist pioneers who also contributed very deeply into the work. And I want to just share, if someone can help me to have rights to share, I do want to share as a last kind of point the pictures that may help us to see the immense task that we have from Pastor Richard Moko. And I believe this is a continuing kind of lecture point where we can maybe in the future focus on Mrs. Moko and focus on other pioneers. I don't know where AMO is going with this, and I don't know where the Moko Foundation is going with this, but there is a rich research field that has been untapped. And a few of us have tried to highlight some important areas, but more needs to be done. But my appeal is more on the stories of Richard Moko and his life. Thank you very much for giving me the sharing rights. I hope you can see my screen. Let me see if I can quickly go to the slideshow. Okay. So Here we have a picture taken some years ago. I took a snap of it at Helderberg, where it is located. And this is the, camp meeting. As you can see, the tent. And right in the corner left there, you can see Pastor Richard Moko among all the white leaders and families. There he is standing there with his hat on. And then you have Pastor Kalaka, David Kalaka, also right there.
Sorry, Doctor.
Yes?
The picture is very small. We can't see anything. It's just black
I
and white.
know. I'm sorry
Unless
for
if you
that.
can
But I
make
can
it
try
full
to
screen.
make it bigger.
I think
Can
you
you
don't
see
have a
now?
preview. Just have a full.
Is it better now or worse? I don't know.
Yeah, better. We can see. Thank you.
Pastor,
You can see now.
yes, you can go. You can go ahead.
Yes.
I know that after the presentation, we will have these things available.
Okay.
So let us allow the pastor to continue to present,
Thank you.
so that we don't disturb him. Thank you.
So this gives you a quick highlight of how the church looked like in those early years. It was largely a white church with only two of our leaders. This is a camp meeting. And so these men, Pastor Richard Moko, Pastor David Kalaka, were really responsible for bringing the truth to the Xhosa people, to the Sotho people, and with the help of the missionaries. But definitely they did a lot of work. And I just want to highlight another picture. Okay, this is an earlier picture of Pastor Moko. There may be more pictures. And a later picture, this is David Kalaka. And I have deliberately, given you pictures taken out of the photographs that I took from Helderberg, without names, without any tags, so that you may see the immense work that we need to do after we have done the research, so much research on Pastor Moko. There are people who were connected with the work, who knew him, that we may need to find out if there are any connections that we can find. So this one is a kind of a video. So I'm going to play the video so that you can see some faces that you may recognize in this short video of this picture.
That was really terrible. I was feeling some guilt for quite a long time. I'm kidding. I'm good. You weren't as good as me.
I'm sorry for the background noise there that comes from my colleagues as we were doing the research. But I want you to just look and focus on the faces.
She was appropriate.
She was, yeah, but she was very okay. She said, if you need to get here.
Okay. Can you imagine if we would be able to identify all these faces? These are leaders. And be able to bring to light their contributions as we move forward with the work. And we thank God for, I've just, it's very blurry, but I've just highlighted some of them from these pictures here. And some of them you may recognize, some you may not. The work that AMO has started is huge. And I appreciate the initiative, but I'm just here to highlight the contributions of Pastor Moko and also how we may need to move forward with the work that he has started among the Xhosa people and beyond. And so his influence, he may also help our young people, help the church, and help us as we draw principles from his own methods on how we can move the work forward. Maybe my time is long gone. I want to thank you very much for the privilege to just share with you a window where we can move forward after reflecting on the life of Pastor Richard Moko. Thank you very much. And I want to stop right here, and then allow for any questions that may come. Thank you.
And thank you very much, Dr. Mxolisi Michael Sokupa, and what information that we have.
I think the person to coordinate is Elder Mafani, Sanga Mafani.
Yes, am I audible?
Yes, yes, Elder, you are.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Okay, thank you very much to Pastor Dr. Sokupa for such very, very, very comprehensive information on Richard Moko and the context. And of course, I thought I was going to make a summary, but time doesn't allow us. And therefore, I think we should utilize this time if there are any questions. Pilar Janji is the one responsible to check.
Are there any questions?
Pastor, perhaps maybe on your side, can you hear us, Dr. Sokupa? I think he cannot hear us because I think there's an issue with his mic. Pilar, can you just type in the message to Doc that we can hear him, but he cannot hear us? So you need to just adjust his volume.
Okay. Got it.
Okay, Pilar, do you have any other, or maybe those questions will be directed to Dr. Sokupa, or maybe you can also read them so that anyway, he won't be able to hear them. But maybe for the benefit of others, I don't know.
Well, good evening, brethren and sisters. There are no questions as such in the chat box, Mr. Mafani. In fact, one contribution is saying that the books that were written, the book that was written by Mr. Mafani in 2011 can be organized for the people in Gauteng through Ugcinulwazi Kamata. So they need to contact him aside if they need the book Genesis to Germination. And then another one contribution is coming from Lungile. He's saying his picture must be there in that Kimberley church by tomorrow with a punctuation mark. And then another one comes from Melum Zijek, AmaXhosa, saying AmaXhosa will organize and courier stock for sale from Genesis to Germination by Mafani Shanga at International Gospel Convention, AmaXhosa. And then it continues to say International Partnership of USA and RSA and Kenya. 2-week International Gospel Convention 2025. Cape Town from 23rd of April to 27th of April, and 30th April to 4th May in SAU headquarters, Bloemfontein. Another one is coming from Pastor Hashalinga to say we now have 131 articles online from SID. Articles on I guess church history or on Richard Moko. And then another one comes from Geraldine Yaze, saying a truly inspiring and thought-provoking lecture. Thank you, Dr. Sokupa, for your insights. Another one comes from Saddam Dikale. Eye-opening presentation indeed. Thank you, AmaXhosa, for affording us this opportunity to be part of this presentation. Thank you to Elder Mafani as well. Blessings, brethren. And the last one comes from Mesh V. How can we obtain the recorded video? Though those are the only remarks that are in the chat box.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you very much, Chairman, for that. I see there's a hand from Patrick Matabeni. Maybe he wants to ask a question here. If he's directly here, may you brief as much as possible. We are only 12 minutes away from the end of the program.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks, Elder. I mean, I hope you can hear me. Can you hear me? I see this background.
Bosi and my General Mkula, may you please mute as Patrick Matabeni is on stage trying to ask a question. May you please be short with your question, Mr. Matabeni?
Yeah, no, thanks, my elder. Yeah, I think first let me just thank the pastor for the great job done on the talk. I mean, I think it was very insightful, and yeah, and I think just want to thank the doctor in a very special way for giving us a good talk and some points to think about. Look, I mean, I've got a couple of questions, but I'll just limit it to one because of time. So it's really around historiography and how we should navigate the context of that history. And I mean, this is really just a question that I think if the doctor can probably help us, as people who obviously have a massive interest in Adventist history in South Africa, to say how do we deal with some of the very unpleasant components of that history that contextualizes, the work that's been done, right? I mean, for an example, like a case in point would be, the racist components of South African history in the church as we think about that history and try to use it to develop the future of Adventism in South Africa. And maybe another case in point would be, for example, you mentioned someone like William Hunt, who obviously was the first person to land here, and whose surroundings, have a very colonial heritage, and also just given the fact that he was a miner coming down to SA in Kimberley, as you rightfully said, coinciding with the discovery of diamond and gold, and just the church's relationship even at that time with people like your Cecil John Rhodes, and many other instances around that time, where the church really sort of, there's other certain components of that history that we have to navigate in retelling the story, right? Which almost like gives a particular context, which you can't avoid as you think about history, as you paint history, how do you think we can best navigate those particular moments in history as we tell it to future generations, or those who are younger than us, or those who are going to come after us, and actually read that history, making sure that, you know, we are true and factual, and it's, you know, and correct, but also open and honest about it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think that's a very important question. I don't have all the answers on how we can navigate through this complex history, and especially on retelling it to the future generations. I have observed that South African historiography has also been changing. I just highlighted the Adventist historiography, but the way history is being written now for South Africa has also changed. How has it changed? I want to highlight just one point to illustrate. You know, in the past, you would have a historian who single-handedly gives you the history from beginning to end, how South Africa started. And one understands that there would be a lot of biases. There are a lot of biases as you look at those old documents of history. And this was kind of the trend and way to do history. But that has since changed. And now you have other voices that are being highlighted, multi-authored books. So if you want a balanced history of South Africa, then you need that kind of a balanced view. And we can learn from how other churches, how other writers have kind of navigated through this difficult, complex history. So I think the important part is to make the voices of our pioneers heard. And by doing that, as I said, if we have access to diaries, which I think is a very sketchy one, if we have access to interviews, if we have access to any information in the context, like right now, I'm going through, some of the minutes of our church, processes. And this is where one discovers, a lot of issues that the church was dealing with, how they were dealing with issues, and so on. Those are some of the things that out of that research would need to be brought up and to be presented so that we have a balanced history where all the voices are heard, and there is a balance also of presentation in terms of the different race groups and how they experienced Imfekane, as it is known, which was around this time when the church started. There were a lot of dynamics there that are racial in nature. How did the church navigate through that? And of course, we can see that there was an openness to receiving, people from across the color line. But how they actually work together is another story. And one needs to understand all those dynamics. And at the end, I think lessons need to be learned from that history. And we need not also, miss the bigger picture, which is the mission, and learning from that history in moving forward the mission and not repeating the same mistakes that were done in the past. So I think stories would play a critical role, a crucial role in highlighting, the experiences of our pioneers as we look at the data that we have already, which I think is very limited, but I think there is still room for finding information that can help to piece together their experience. Thank you very much. I hope I was able to respond adequately to that question, but it's a very important question.
Thanks very much, Dr. Sokupa, for that response. Is there any other question, or that was the only question, before I then take this back to Amo to close the session? Any other question? Pilar, do you have any other question? Or anyone from Amo who has spotted a question, someone?
No, my elder, there are no further questions.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. And for that, what a powerful, once again, presentation. And for those maybe who have joined later, and I liked the statement that says, we are standing on the shoulders of those who were moved by God's Spirit, such as Richard Moko, and what the challenges that have been given to Moko Foundation, as well as to AMO, and to people in general. And such challenges as to make sure that Moko's history is visible, focus on shepherdesses' work, and a lot more. And I hope that you have jotted down those and will make them realized. And with that, I once again thank you, Dr. Sokupa, and back to Amo, and to close the session. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mafani, my elder, for giving us that summary and facilitating the question and answer session. Now we are going to hand over to the CEO of AMO, our brother Mfesane Ndudula, to do the closing remarks. Over to you, Ben.
Thank you so much. Good evening, everyone. We take this opportunity to thank everyone who made this lecture possible, from all the stakeholders, for facilitators and the chairman. Mfundisi Sekupa, thank you so much, Fundisi. We really appreciated the lecture. It is both a privilege and an honor for us as AMO South Africa to be part of this great initiative where we look back and we learn, because this speaks to the work that AMO SA is all about, where we try to create space for men to learn, for information to be shared, and to empower men to continue with God's mission. So we are both excited to be part of this great opportunity where we are able to come before our elders to learn of the journey that has been embarked in the past, and to craft as young people a way forward in carrying the work of the Lord. We have noted the flags that you have raised in your presentation from our side, and we trust that the Lord will help us to make those a reality, to bring them to reality. And with the assistance of the Lord, we will contact everyone, all stakeholders involved in this great initiative, and take that work forward. Just before I close in prayer, I would like to let you all know that AMO South Africa, in the next few weeks, we will be hosting our second International Gospel Convention. It will be happening from the 23rd to the 27th of April in Cape Town. That will be our first leg, which will be followed by our second leg, which will be in Bloemfontein from the 30th of April to the 4th of May. When I heard Fundisi presenter and we made mention of the fact that you may be coming to Bloemfontein, or how I longed in my heart to say, if only our dates could be around that same weekend, where we can also be part of your visit in Kimberley, because we will be having in our International Gospel Convention visitors coming from America, they'll be coming from Kenya. And so we ask that you, brethren, may continue to pray for the work of AMO. May you continue to support in always possible to you, so that we make the work of the Lord forward. Without wasting your time further, let us bow our heads and close our eyes in prayer. Dear Lord, thank you for this opportunity to gather in this manner and fashion this evening to reflect on the work that your servant has done. We ask that as we plan for other lectures to come, you may rekindle in our hearts and spirits the passion and zeal to work for you, so that we may carry the gospel message forward and hasten your soon coming. We pray that you may continue to lead and guide us as we will be planning for other lectures to come. We pray that you may go before us and open all the doors that need to be opened. May you supply us with all the resources and right people to carry this work forward. Until we meet again, we ask that you keep us safe in the palm of your hand until the storms of life are passed by. This we ask and we receive together with the forgiveness of our sins in Jesus' name. Amen. Thank you so much and good night.
Amen.
Good night. Thank you.
Siyabonga.
Good night and bye.
Nkosi mhlala ngaphambili neqala labo.
You're welcome.
Siyabonga kakhulu. Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much. Great.
Simathola nyongande kudlelana. Thank you.
Siyabulela kakhulu. Thank you so much.
Ngikwazi ukuphuma nje mina.
Thank you so much to everyone. The meeting now will be closed.